Nadia Voss had learned a long time ago that the forest did not care who you were. It did not care if you had a name, or a pack, or a place to belong. It only cared if you were strong enough to keep moving. And Nadia had always been strong enough for that, even when she was strong enough for nothing else. She was 24 years old, and she had been walking alone for 6 years. She was not unhappy, exactly. She had simply accepted a certain kind of life. She moved through the neutral zones between pack territories, never staying long enough to form attachments, never close enough to anyone to be hurt when she left. She carried a worn leather satchel, a small knife, and the memory of a family she had chosen to leave behind. Most nights, that was enough. The night everything changed, she was passing through the eastern edge of the Drath territory border, following a trail she had used twice before. The trees were thick here, and the autumn air was sharp and cold, carrying the smell of pine and damp earth. She was thinking about nothing in particular when she heard the scream. It was high and frightened, the scream of someone young, and it cut through the quiet night like a blade. Nadia did not hesitate. She never did, and that was perhaps both her greatest strength and the thing that had gotten her into trouble more times than she could count. She dropped her satchel at the base of a wide oak tree and ran toward the sound. She found the girl in a small clearing, backed against a fallen log, 3 large figures closing in around her. The girl was young, maybe 16, with dark hair and wide eyes that were full of fear, but not fully broken yet. She was still standing, still trying to make herself tall, even though her hands were shaking. Nearby, 2 guards lay on the ground, breathing but unconscious. Nadia did not stop to ask questions. She moved into the clearing fast and put herself between the girl and the 3 attackers. The fight was not clean or quick. The attackers were large and organized, and there were 3 of them, and Nadia was one person. She took a bad hit across her ribs early in the struggle, and another across her left shoulder that made her arm go briefly numb, but she did not stop. She fought the way she had always fought, with everything she had, and no thought of stopping until the threat was gone. 2 of the attackers eventually fled into the trees. The 3rd she pinned until he could not move. By the time it was over, she was bleeding from 2 places and breathing hard, and the girl was staring at her with an expression that was somewhere between shock and awe. Nadia turned and put herself between the girl and the dark tree line, scanning for any sign of more attackers. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No," the girl said. Her voice was steadier than expected. "You are, though. I've had worse." A few minutes later, the sound of approaching footsteps came from the northern path, and a group of armed guards came into the clearing at a run. They wore uniforms Nadia did not recognize, and they outnumbered her badly, and for a moment, her instincts told her to be ready. She stepped in front of the girl again. "Stop," the girl said behind her, and then she stepped around Nadia and held up her hand to the guards. "She is not a threat. She saved my life. If any of you touch her, you will answer to my brother." The guards stopped. One of them, a tall man with gray at his temples, looked at Nadia with an expression she could not fully read. "Who are you?" he asked. "Nobody," Nadia said honestly. The girl took her hand, and it was such a simple gesture, so unexpectedly warm, that Nadia almost pulled away out of habit. "Her name is Nadia," the girl said firmly, "and she comes with us." Her name, Nadia learned that night, was Lena, Princess Lena Drath, the youngest sister of King Calum Drath, who ruled over the largest and most powerful of the wolf territories in the region. Nadia did not know this when she fought for her. She found it out afterward, sitting in a clean room, in a castle she had never imagined entering, while someone wrapped bandages around her ribs, and she tried to decide how she felt about all of it. She was told the king wanted to see her. She was told to wait. She waited for 2 days. During those 2 days, she watched the castle around her. She watched the way people moved here, the careful, measured way that everyone seemed to carry themselves, always aware of where they stood in relation to everyone else. She watched the way the youngest servants kept their eyes down. She watched the way the nobles looked at her, the unknown woman in the East Wing, with expressions that ranged from curiosity to suspicion. She ate when food was brought. She slept. She healed. On the 3rd morning, she was brought to the formal receiving hall. It was a large, serious room with high ceilings and stone walls and along one side of it sat 12 people in a curved row, the royal elders, the senior council of the territory. They were old and sharp-eyed, and clearly accustomed to being the most important people in any room. At the center of it all stood King Calum Drath. Nadia had expected someone who looked like a king, polished and performed, dressed for being looked at. What she found was something different. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and he held himself with the kind of stillness that did not come from practice but from something deeper, the stillness of a person who had long ago stopped needing to prove anything to anyone. His eyes were dark and steady, and they went to her immediately when she entered the room and did not move away. He did not say thank you. His first words to her were, "Tell me exactly what happened, leave nothing out." So she did. She described the clearing, the 3 attackers, the positions of the unconscious guards, the direction the 2 fleeing attackers had taken. She described it the way she experienced it, plainly, without making herself sound brave, or the moment sound dramatic. She also told him that she had not known who Lena was when she stepped in. When she finished, one of the elders, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes, who was introduced as Elder Marin, looked at her carefully and said, "What do you want in return?" "Nothing," Nadia said. "I want to leave." The room was very quiet. The king's eyes stayed on her face for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then he said, "You cannot leave yet." He explained that the attack on Lena was not random. It was planned, which meant information had come from somewhere close to the royal circle. Until the source was found, Nadia was both a witness and potentially someone the attackers might want to silence. She would stay in the castle for the duration of the investigation. Lena, who had apparently insisted on being present for this meeting and had been allowed to sit at the edge of the dais, made no attempt to hide how pleased she was by this decision. The days that followed were unlike any Nadia had known in years. Lena attached herself to Nadia with the warm, unstoppable energy of someone who had already decided they were friends and was simply waiting for the other person to realize it. She asked questions constantly about what it was like to travel alone, about how Nadia had learned to fight, about what the neutral forest zones looked like in different seasons. She asked them with genuine curiosity, not as a way to fill silence, but because she actually wanted to know. Nadia answered honestly. She told Lena that the lone life was quiet, and that quiet could be good, but that it was also lonely. She told her that she had learned most of what she knew from necessity, from situations she had to survive. She did not romanticize any of it. Lena listened to all of it without pity, which was why Nadia did not mind telling her. During this same stretch of days, Nadia became aware that the king was watching her, not in an uncomfortable way, but in the way of someone who was paying close attention and thinking carefully about what they observed. She saw him in the corridor sometimes, at a distance, and once from a window she noticed him watching the training yard, where she was working through forms to keep her healing shoulder from stiffening. His expression gave very little away, but he watched. She told herself it was the watchfulness of a king with a security problem to solve, and that was probably partially true. The investigation broke open on a gray morning, halfway through her second week in the castle. One of the captured attackers had finally given up a name under questioning. The name was Lord Aldrich Voss, a noble from the outer territories, who had for months been attempting to negotiate a political arrangement involving Lena. When King Calum had refused the proposal, Aldrich had apparently decided that a staged kidnapping, followed by a theatrical rescue, performed by men under his control, would give him the kind of leverage that a polite refusal had not. The name Voss moved through the receiving hall like a stone dropped into still water. It was also Nadia's name. Elder Marin was on her feet within moments. The implication was spoken aloud almost immediately. Was the woman who had saved the princess actually part of the plot? Had the rescue been designed from the start? Nadia was brought before the elders for the second time. There were real guards behind her now. She stood in the center of the hall and looked at the faces watching her, some hostile, some uncertain, and she did not look down or away. "Aldrich Voss is my father's brother," she said clearly. "I left my family 6 years ago and have had no contact with them since. I did not know about any plan. I did not know who Lena was. I will submit to a truth-telling ceremony if that is what is required." Elder Marin began to speak, her tone already decided, her conclusion already formed. And then Lena stood up. It was a breach of the formal protocol of the hall, and several of the elders looked startled, but Lena stood up anyway, and looked directly at Elder Marin. She did not know, Lena said. Her voice was calm and very firm. She was bleeding before the guards arrived. I was there. None of you were. The hall went quiet. Nadia looked at the girl she had known for less than 2 weeks, this young princess who should by all logic have been far more concerned with her own position than with defending a stranger, and felt something shift in her chest that she had not expected. The truth-telling ceremony was arranged quickly. It was an old and respected ritual, one that could not be deceived by a prepared story or a careful performance. The result was clear. Nadia had known nothing of the plot. She had acted alone, on instinct, for a stranger. Aldrich Voss was arrested before the end of the day, but the question of Nadia did not resolve itself the way a simple clearing of suspicion should have, because in the moment before the truth-telling ceremony began, while the hall was still tense and uncertain, something had happened. King Calum Drath had risen from his throne. He had walked down from the dais, across the floor of the hall, and he had come to stand beside Nadia, not behind her, not between her and the elders in a position of authority, beside her. And when he stood there, something came into his eyes that was not the controlled, measured expression he always wore. It was older than that, deeper than that, something that came from a part of him that titles and responsibility did not govern. The air in the hall seemed to change, and then he lowered his head, a slow and deliberate motion, and every person in the room who understood what that meant went completely still. It was the gesture of a wolf who had recognized something irreversible. Elder Marin found her voice first. "This cannot be," she said. "She has no rank, she has no pack, and no title. She is a stranger from outside our borders, and you cannot." "I will hear every objection," the king said quietly, "after the accusation against her is formally withdrawn." His voice was not raised. It did not need to be. The ceremony proceeded. The result was delivered. The accusation was withdrawn. But the other thing, the thing that had happened in the middle of that hall in front of every royal elder and every guard and every pair of watching eyes, did not disappear with the resolution of the crisis. It had been seen. It could not be unseen. That night, Nadia stood on the outer ramparts of the castle and looked out at the dark line of the forest. She had been looking at forests her whole adult life, and always thinking about which way through them would take her to the next place. She was not sure what she was thinking now. She heard footsteps and knew without turning who it was. The king came to stand beside her. He was quiet for a long time, and she did not feel the need to fill the silence, and neither did he. The wind moved through the trees below them. "What happened in the hall today was real," he said at last. "I am not going to pretend otherwise, and I am not going to pretend I have an explanation that makes it simpler than it is." He paused. "I also will not ask anything of you that you have not chosen freely. You may leave when the investigation is formally closed. No one will stop you." Nadia was quiet for a moment. The forest stretched out below them, familiar and dark and full of open paths. "I have been leaving my whole life," she said finally. "I am tired." It was not a love declaration. She did not have the words for one of those, and she was not sure she believed in them anyway. It was something more honest, the admission of a woman who had been alone for so long that standing still felt like a risk she was only now willing to consider. He said, "Then stay." No promises, no ceremony, just 2 words that meant more than a long speech would have. She stayed. 3 mornings later, she was in the training yard with Lena, teaching her a defensive move that Lena had been asking about for days. Lena was a determined student, and she had her brother's quality of focused stillness when she was concentrating, which Nadia had noticed and found quietly funny. Lena got the movement right on the 4th attempt. She turned around with a wide, unguarded grin, the kind of joy that had no performance in it at all. Nadia smiled back. From the upper corridor above the yard, King Calum stood with a folder of council work in his hand, forgotten. He watched his sister laugh freely for what felt like the first time in a very long time. He watched Nadia stand in the pale morning light with no title, and no announcement, and no attempt to be anything other than exactly what she was. He had spent his life learning that the most important things in a kingdom were the things you built with intention, the alliances formed carefully, the decisions weighed and measured, and chosen after long consideration. He still believed that. He would always believe that. But he was also beginning to understand that some things did not arrive through planning. Some things arrived in the middle of an ordinary night in the forest. Some things arrived bleeding and asking for nothing. And if you were paying attention, if you were not too proud, or too careful, or too practiced in your own control to notice, you recognized them. Not because they announced themselves, because they were already there.